hunger, and so when they get their prey, they go for the throat and suffocate it. But of course, what they feed on, I mean, they mostly feed on things like zebra, wildebeest, antelope, and even baboons. Of course, leopards are opportunists and will feed on anything, but probably their most dangerous prey are warthogs. Well, warthogs are a good prey source. They are far from defenceless with vicious tusks. In fact, warthogs can and do kill leopards. And as I've mentioned earlier, leopards do most of their hunting at night. And that's mainly because while it tends to be very hot during the day, a lot of animals usually come out at night in Africa because it's cooler. And so the leopard hunts then. And while its prey, like antelope, have a very good sense of smell and hearing, they don't have very good night vision. In fact, their night vision is little better than our own. And of course, that allows leopards to just creep up on them like a thief in the night. And how they do it is by placing each foot down very, very carefully, and even controlling their breathing. And then, when they're within no more than 5 meters of their prey, boom! They pounce. And they quite often take their prey by surprise. And what's probably most incredible about the leopard is once they've made a kill, they have the strength and agility to haul the carcass up into a high tree where no other predator like a lion or a leopard or a hyena can get to it. And that allows them to enjoy their meal in peace and undisturbed. Of course, leopards are also probably Africa's most dangerous big cats, and that's mainly down to the fact that they're just very unpredictable, and of course they kill more people each year than lions, and a lot of the time that's because leopards are both unpredictable, they hunt at night, and a lot of the time they tend to live near farms, and that can often cause them to attack people if they're out monitoring their livestock. But attacks on people are very, very rare, and leopards tend to avoid people whenever they can. And of course, this animal, while it can be hunted in much of its range, it is illegal in many parts of Africa. And even if someone wants to hunt a leopard, it's very, very hard because, as I said, they're mostly nocturnal, they're very elusive, and to this day, they still continue to be one of Africa's most elusive animals. And that is their range. And of course, the next animal I'm going to show you is our closest living relative. It is the chimpanzee. Chimpanzees are primates like us. They're found in the forests and jungles of Central and Western Africa. They live in family groups of about 30 to 40 animals, but the biggest family group of chimps ever discovered was 150 animals in Uganda, right in the Ngorongoro National Park. And they have very big brains, so they are intelligent, and chimps also know how to use tools. In fact, they've been seen for many decades now using rocks and logs to crack open tough forest nuts, using sticks to fish ants and termites out of their nests, and even in Gabon in West Africa, chimps have been seen when they find a tortoise, they quite often whack it against the buttress root of a tree to get to the tortoise inside. And what many people don't know is chimps don't just eat fruit. In fact, less than half of their diet is made up of fruit. But they do eat meat. I mean, a lot what they feed on a lot of the time is monkeys, bush pigs, small antelope, and even that they can be cannibalistic with rivals. of course, their favourite prey are colobus monkeys, which are small, light and agile, and they can move on the thinnest of branches, but the heavy chimp hasn't a hope alone. But chimps work together to hunt colobus monkeys, and how they do it is very, very ingenious. In fact, one chimp who is the chaser, well, it's usually a young chimp or new to hunting, has to climb up underneath the monkeys in the canopy and flush them out. And the chimps on the ground watch on, and they run ahead of the colobus. And some climb trees on either side. Those chimps are called the blockers. Their job is to funnel the monkeys into running between them. But on the ground, the smartest chimp, who is the chief monkey catcher or the ambusher, runs even further ahead. And if he sees the sides and sees the blockers, he anticipates where the monkeys will go and climbs a tree on right ahead of them and hides. And as the chimps chase the monkeys through the treetops, the monkeys panic and they run right into the trap, and then bang! They can catch at least 6 or 7 monkeys in one hunt. And while to many people, meat hunting for chimps might look gruesome, the protein from the meat is a vital part of their diet and helps fuel those big brains. And of course, it's actually believed that we share between 98 to 99% of our DNA with these animals. And Charles Darwin, who was the greatest naturalist and biologist who's ever lived, was actually based a lot of his theories on evolution by watching chimps in Africa. And of course, whenever people go and see chimpanzees in the wild, quite a lot of the time they can feel like they've been transported back in time, because humans and chimps share a common ancestor, and they're our closest living relatives. And if you look at a human and a chimp side by side, I mean, everything from their body language, their gestures, their facial expressions, just everything about a chimp almost looks human. But of course, this being our closest cousin, it's even more of a tragedy now that they're at risk because of us. Chimpanzees are classed as endangered, and there are many reasons for that. I mean, the first one is we are cutting down the forests they rely on, destroying them to make way for plantations, towns and farms. But also, chimps are hunted for the bushmeat trade, which the hunting of chimps for the bushmeat trade is illegal, because adult chimps are killed so their meat can be taken to markets and sold as food, which is not just dangerous to the chimps, but it's also dangerous to humans, because many life-threatening diseases can pass between us. But probably the worst for me is the pet trade, because quite often when young chimps, when their mothers are killed, they're then stolen from the wild to be sold through the illegal pet trade, to be sold as either pets to disreputable zoos, to labs to be experimented on, or even more horrible, for tourists to have their photos taken with. And then when the cute youngsters turn into big, strong, aggressive and unpredictable adults, they're either abandoned or mistreated. In fact, in Monkey World in Dorset in the south of England, they actually rescue many primates every year, and they do rescue chimps that have been used as either lab rats or as tourist props. And there was actually one in the 1980s. There was a chimpanzee called Charlie who was rescued from Spain after spending 7 to 8 years as a beach photographer's prop. And when they found Charlie, he was in a very bad state, and he had all but 3 of his teeth pulled out, which resulted in him having mental issues. He was a drug addict, having been given vast quantities of a relaxation drug to keep him calm and under control. He had machete wounds to his head, fractured feet, cataracts and a broken jaw. But fortunately he was rescued, and the photographer was of course sent to jail, but Charlie was taken to Monkey World in Dorset, where he spent the rest of his life very happily. There are ways to protect chimpanzees, and that one of them is with tourism, with tracking them down with cameras rather than guns. And of course people do go to see chimpanzees in the wild, and that is one way to protect them. Of course, unfortunately, there's also like anti-poaching squads as well that work to protect chimps in the wild, with like dismantling poacher snares and policing their territories. But like with gorillas, when you go and see chimps in the wild, you also have to wear a face mask when you're near them, because like with gorillas, chimps are very closely related to us, and they are also susceptible to our diseases. So we have to do everything we can to protect them. Of course, this is their range. As you can see, they're found in Central and Western Africa. And of course, the next animal is the rarest and probably most threatened member of the dog family. It's the Ethiopian or Abyssinian wolf. The Ethiopian wolf is found in Ethiopia or Abyssinia, hence the name, and where it is endemic to Ethiopia, meaning it's found there and nowhere else on Earth. Of course, the Ethiopian wolf is a very different animal to its grey wolf cousin, because the muzzle is a lot longer and thinner to get into cracks and crevices. The teeth are smaller and more spread out than they are on a grey wolf. But also, it's their social structure. I mean, Ethiopian wolves do live in packs, but they hunt on their own, because where they live in places like the Bale Mountains, there's nothing up there that's bigger, like an elk, a moose, or a bison that needs to be brought down by the whole pack working together. But what they do is they feed on things like giant mole rats, and how they catch them is with stealth. I mean, they creep up on their prey and then leap towards it, and of course, unfortunately, over the last few decades, these wolves have been under tremendous pressure. They've suffered from hunting, habitat loss, and most recently from disease. And now there's less than 500 individuals left in the wild, which makes them the most threatened member of the dog family. And of course, the main reason why these wolves are so rare is habitat loss, because Ethiopia's human population has been expanding at a rapid rate, and all those people now need more space to live and to grow their food, and as humans take up the land for farming, that's leaving less and less space for the wolves to live and raise their pups. And a lot of them have been pushed into the highest mountain ranges of Ethiopia. But also, a few decades ago, Ethiopian wolves were blamed for livestock predation, but that has since been disproven, and they're no longer threatened by that. But probably the worst is the worst reason these wolves have been suffering is down to a disease that affects the dog family, because people in Ethiopia, like many people around the world, keep dogs, and pet dogs in Ethiopia have one of the highest rates of rabies in the world, a disease which affects all members of the canine family and unfortunately is fatal. And the wolves easily catch rabies when they come into contact with domestic or stray dogs. But there are people trying to do things about this, like Vaccinations are being given to the local dogs to prevent the spread of rabies to the wolves, and efforts are